Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world speaking about the hottest topics in the industry are scheduled twice monthly. Before we get to today's conversation, a quick housekeeping note. We'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of the session today, but you do not have to wait to ask them. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them in the background, and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the episode. Today's episode is titled The Skinny on Diginets. And they've been a part of the television landscape for nearly 2 decades now. These days, no media plan is created without considering them. Diginets' ability to draw in viewers across platform, from reaching America's 25 million broadband-only households via over-the-air antennas, to appearing on most major traditional pay TV packages, and now starting to pop up as streaming channels on free, ad-supported TV platforms, is golden on today's TV advertising landscape. What's the latest in this burgeoning space, and what must performance and D2C marketers understand about its advertising opportunities? I'm happy to welcome this pair of experts from PDMI member companies, Hartman, Cannella Media's Vice President of Short Form, and Jeff Nash, MeTV's Senior Vice President of Network Sales. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. You know, it's a 20-minute show, so we got to get to it. Ellie, I'm going to start with you. From a buyer's perspective, what are the biggest advantages of including Diginets in a campaign?
Yeah, excellent question. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me. I mean, there are a few different ones. Just starting at the top. Just simply programming. It's very familiar, old school programming that a lot of the DR consumers are familiar with, and they sort of sometimes just leave it on in the background, and they're okay with getting quote unquote interrupted in their programming with DR ads. So they tend to respond better than they would typically a consumer who's watching primetime or live sports or that type of programming. Another thing which could be a strength or a weakness, but ratings. Some of them are rated, but a lot of them, since they're unrated, a lot of the big brands aren't going after them as heavily as the DR consumer, or sorry, TR marketer is going after. So you're able to get the frequency with your affordability because of that, because you can get that amount of frequency you need in order to test the product and also scale it to be a successful return on investment campaign. And then also audiences, as we touched on the top a little bit, they're over the air, they're in a lot of markets throughout the country, and it's a lot of cord cutters as well, so you're hitting sometimes different eyeballs than you would necessarily hit on just a typical national cable network.
Absolutely, makes sense. Jeff, to you, from a seller's perspective, obviously you're dealing from a place of pretty strong place. MeTV's networks are among, if not the most successful Diginets out there. What makes your networks and other Diginets so important to performance and direct-to-consumer marketing campaigns?
We could easily turn this into a 2-hour conversation, but I'll try not to. There's a lot to them. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of them from day one. MeTV launched, I just use MeTV as our example since I'm familiar with it. We have 6 other networks. December 15th, 2010, we launched in 3% of the country. And I knew at the time that they were a unique opportunity for advertisers. Little did I know that they would expand into what they are today and what they offer today. As Ellie alluded to it, our distribution model is really important for advertisers to understand what it is. He mentioned over the air. That is a huge part of our DNA. As rating erosions occur, as people cut cords and whatnot, I look at the Diginets as being sort of resilient to any of that. And the reason, you can find us over the air. We compete in the cable marketplace, negotiating CPMs, things of that nature, very equivalent to what cable and offers and whatnot. But they get the added value of the over-the-air home, And in terms of ratings, MeTV, for example, I was just looking at some of our numbers in June, and I'm only using us as an example, and there are other Diginets that fall into this ranker that are very important and strong too. We were ranked number 4 in daytime in People 2+. The only 3 networks that outperformed us were Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. So we were the #1 rated general entertainment network in People 2+. And again, you know, we focus on the older skewing programming, but there's some younger skewing programming out there that we target and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, our demographic is definitely 35-64. You know, we target the baby boomers. They have over 70% of the total spending power in the country. You know, there's 75+ million baby boomers in the United States and whatnot, and they control the marketplace. But we also target the younger generation, and I'm seeing more of that lately with cord cutting, as viewers find us for the first time, young families that, you know, are looking for programming that is family friendly and whatnot, and we see those numbers growing up. And out of the 120 out of the 120 cable networks that are rated, you know, MeTV still in the top 25% in adults 25-54. I think we were 30th in that demo in daytime and whatnot. And the same could be said for Prime. But what, you know, the Diginets offer is, you know, each hour, each half hour, different program. So we retain our audience longer than most cable networks or broadcast networks might. It's a great direct response platform. You know, you have people that watch it 86 minutes a day. You know, they're engaged, they're loyal, they're committed to the brand. That gets passed down to the advertisers who invest with us. And we see, you know, if you think about it, since 2010, how many new advertisers have we put out there in the marketplace because of the Diginets? And there are thousands of them, and the constant new business that we generate in that space in linear television is very successful. So, you know, there's a lot to be said. I think over time, you know, we are dabbling into more of the general market, Nielsen rated upfront scatter marketplace. They see the value. We were able, or a group of people that took the lead on this, were able to get the Diginets in their own SAG-AFTRA category in the new contract that they signed in 2022. That is huge. We were rolled up in cable and broadcast, or basically broadcast in the past. Now we have our own, you know, our own rate structure, and that has been noticed by a lot of advertisers. DR, general market, programmatic, they all see, you know, that that this type of linear platforms are very important and should be targeted, you know, for just about any campaign.
Absolutely. You both mentioned the age of the audience, and I think that's been, if there's one cliche that gets kicked around about Diginets, it's about that demo, the older demo that the target. You know, but you did mention that you know, you are seeing some things skew younger as that older demo adapts to streaming. And I'm going to open this up to both of you. How do you guys see Diginets adapting with those viewers as they go across and do more streaming? Obviously, I know MeTV, you've made some moves into the fast marketplace. What are you guys going to be doing? And from the buyer side, what do you hope?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in there. I think as more and more people are switching over or adding streaming to their viewing consumption, you know, all the projections show that in the next year or two, streaming hours per day is going to overtake linear hours. I think it's going to be important that the, you know, other Diginets follow the MeTV example of adding to the fast services, that you're just going to be able to use the streaming platforms, whether it be on Roku, etc., to, you know, launch your own video on demand channel, streaming video on demand channel, where you're able to get that audience extension, and then you can continue to target the demo that responds well for ROI-based campaigns on top of the general market as well, that you can use audience extension. You can hit them with a little more targeted as a marketer side, a little more targeting on that, obviously, you know, changing CPM value, but and obviously it also changes in terms of how the length of the ads, but at the same time, they, again, as you mentioned, as you mentioned, you know, the streaming options need to be something that the Diginets are going to be taking part of, and adding that on as pretty much as an audience extension to what you're currently buying on the linear side.
No, I agree 100% with that. I think all Diginets are taking a hard look at those platforms. You know, we have deals in place, you know, with Friendly. I think five of our 6 networks are on Friendly. We have distribution now with Sling for HNI and Start. I think YouTube TV has Sling. DRTV streaming has HNI, and I think Philo we've launched Decades and Start. And we have a team that's engaged on that. They're looking at those platforms aggressively, making the decision on when we want to join or if we want to join. We're not just going to rush into it and just I wouldn't say be like everybody else, but it needs to make sense for us. Our true bread and butter is linear television. We are available over the air, on cable, and on ADS. It's great to have options. Viewers have options. Of course, that's why we're looking at these platforms and whatnot. But I think over time, you're still going to see linear television stand out above, a lot of digital plays or different streams that might be out there. You also get into that situation, and I've talked, I think, to both John and JY about this in the past. There's so much chatter about cord cutting and whatnot, but there also is some chatter taking place now about being subscription broke. You're done signing up for the Hulus and Netflix and all those streaming platforms. And don't get me wrong, I'm not being critical of them at all. I think I subscribe to them. But at some point in time, it really adds up, So what's the purpose of cutting the cord and having all that content available when you have to sign up for, 8 to 10 different streaming devices and search for your content, So I still think over time that market's going to be defined. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to go away, but I think it'll you'll see some a few that'll stand out and a few that may not,
Yeah,
Makes sense.
So just to add that, Jeff, 100% accurate in terms of, people cut the cord because, right, you're paying $150, $200 a month for DirecTV, Dish, etc. You have 300 channels. I watch 2 of them. It gets to a point where everyone's coming out with the streaming option. You're subscribing to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. People, I think, are going to revert back to what they're comfortable with. And even if you're subscribing to a bunch, people, I know through my phone provider, I get a bunch for free. I pay for other ones as well. But the ones I'm most comfortable with, that are most easy to access, are the ones that are going to continue to get the bulk of the viewing. And obviously, content is king as well, right? So if the Diginets continue to have that content that people are attracted to, and for this demo, they're going to go and watch it, whether it's on linear or even on the streaming side as well.
Exactly. That's exactly. Looking at, I keep referring back to our network of portfolio of networks and stuff. They are networks, but it's a brand, and we want our brand to be out there. We wanted people to see that's a MeTV network, so no matter where they're at, they're going to be engaged, they're going to watch it and things of that nature. And I think over time, there's so much programming out there. You have so many different options, that a viewer as well as an advertiser has at their disposal, but it's the way you present it, what kind of environment, are you presenting that content in? What are the advertisers getting in return? What are you doing that's different than others? Things of that nature. And I think that's where this is going to end up in the future. It's all about how you brand who you are and how you're identified in the marketplace as somebody or as a group that people want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a great conversation. I think, it's an interesting point always to raise when we start talking about how streaming services are already kind of reaching a saturation point with many consumers. There's a bunch of studies showing that a lot of people are stuck at 4 to 5 regular streaming subscriptions a month, that when they add a new one, they don't usually just add, they drop another one. There's a lot of rotating through based on programming. People will pick up something just to watch a specific show, then drop it. All of these things that I think people warned about as we moved so quickly from linear to streaming have started coming true. Not that that's going to stop the change in how TV and video is consumed, but there is something still to be said for linear and where it works, and then Diginets having a great leadership and role and fit in that. I am going to ask another quick question though about Diginets and streaming. Seems like every major network and studio is operating at least one streaming service. Are you worried about Diginets getting gobbled up into exclusive fast hubs or even folded into offerings like of live TV streaming services or SVOD content libraries? Is there a worry there? Should there be a worry there?
I don't think so. I mean, look, media, television in general, it's constantly changing. The landscape is totally different than it was 2 or 3 years ago. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. Only time will tell. But I'll leave it at this. No one can say that TV isn't healthy right now, especially linear television, because how many options do people have? How many networks are out there that people have an opportunity to watch, or advertisers have an opportunity to invest in? You're not seeing, networks or linear television networks disappear or go away. They keep evolving, So I just think over time, you're going to have more opportunities to find us on different platforms that people don't have today. And I think as people become more educated on those platforms, the older generation, for example, they're starting to discover it. It's going to take more time, I mean, majority of them still are trying to understand their iPhone, and things of that nature. So, we got to see where this goes long term. There's still a lot that needs to be proven. But at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that linear television will always be the anchor, and everything else is a subcategory of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and hopefully is my audio a little better now?
Yeah, it sounds.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, to Jeff, what you're saying, I agree. I think for the most part, the bigger of the Diginets are most likely going to avoid, sort of that merger conglomerate that we're seeing on the network side and on the streaming side for the bigger players. There might be some smaller ones that get gobbled up, like you see with any merger and acquisition channel that obviously is a growing one. And I think the point to remember is, Jeff, I think you hit it on the head where there's still so much to be figured out over the next few years. And as far as streaming has come over the last 24 to 36 months, it's still in its really early infancy. I think especially from like a DR and a return on investment strategy, it's still even younger than that as more marketers shift some dollars and testing dollars into the streaming options. I think for the next foreseeable future, for the next few years at a minimum, I think the linear is still going to remain a big chunk of where advertisers are going to go to get that mass audience. If you have a mass audience appeal for your product, linear is going to be like Jeff said, linear is going to be the base. You're going to probably dabble in some streaming and continue to grow a portion of your budgets there. But in order to really expand and go out to your mass audience, is going to be on the linear side.
Yeah, and keep in mind, guys, Diginets evolved back in the late 2000s when analog television became the spectrum became available. Everything became digital. So there's spectrum that allowed for this to happen. Today, I'm going to use Chicago DMA as an example. I have a few TVs in my house that have small, really small over-the-air antennas. They have a 50-mile radius that it can reach. I put it behind the TV. I turn it on. I hit scan. It's amazing that you will find 80 plus over-the-air television stations that are out there. You can go to any market and pretty much discover that. It's almost like having your own little cable system at home for free. You'll have your sports, you'll have your general entertainment, you have your news, you got so much programming that you can find over the air. It's fascinating, to kind of look at it that way, and whatnot. So that's probably one of the biggest things I think over time that the Diginets will continue to deliver is the over-the-air homes are going to continue to expand. We're seeing the growth today. You compare it over the last 3 to 5 years, it's definitely it's still going in a nice direction, and I expect that to continue for some time. But yeah, that to me is probably one of our biggest strengths.
That's great. There's a lot of talk here in the last few moments about where things have come in the last 24 to 36 months. I'm going to close out my questions. Where do you guys see things in the next 24 for Diginets?
I'll jump in. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think business as usual. High demand for the inventory. In my opinion, it's already proven to be successful for a lot of direct response campaigns. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that the general market guys are starting to look at us. I would say probably 70% of our total revenue is based on Nielsen ratings right now, you know, and impressions and things of that nature. Direct response, they're going to continue to look at ratings more so than they may look at, you know, call to action messaging, you know, CPMs or CPLs and things of that nature. I think it's the industry as a whole, Diginet industry as a whole, will continue to evolve, and I think you're going to see this be on a lot more advertising game plans long term. And I think the future is very, very bright for the industry, you know, and I know there's a lot of obstacles that we have to, you know, overcome, and hurdles we have to jump over and all that. But look, we embrace that, you know, we love change. We're innovators, you know, that's the key word right there. We're innovators. We brought a new marketplace to the viewers, and I still think it's in its infancy stage.
Yeah, and just to add a bit there, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Jeff just said there. I think as long as the Diginets remain a source of video consumption for the demos that respond well, not only for DR and ROI type campaigns, but even the branded response campaigns, and like you said, Jeff, the general market with the ratings, it's going to be a big part. I know from our perspective of, you know, testing strategy as well as expansion strategy and scaling strategy for our clients. And obviously the ones, again, that consider that return on investment more so than the ratings, they're going to play a big factor in the growth. I think, like Jeff said, it's still in its infancy. The Diginets as a whole, they continue to innovate. They continue to bring on new programming to their networks that, again, just keeps that consumer base loyal and coming back for that content. Because at the end of the day, again, as long as you can attract that viewer with appealing content that they're familiar with or they want to watch, they're going to come back to your channel and they're going to watch it.
Awesome. Let's going to turn to the audience. We got some good ones here today. Good, solid questions. The first one, you guys get to put on like your visionary hat and just give me a number. How many more Diginets do you think will be created in the next 5 to 10 years? I believe the number right now overall, just so you guys have some perspective, if you don't know this, as I was reading a story last week, I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 total Diginets out there. So.
No, that's a great question. There comes a point in time where the market becomes saturated too, you know, and I don't want to be negative or whatnot, but the key component to Diginets is your distribution model, obviously programming and things of that nature. And if you don't have a balance of both, then it's going to be very difficult long term. It depends on, you know, content too, you know, what categories might be available, you know, out there that aren't available now. We seem to have the majority of them covered, you know. Personally, I think at some point there will be a correction in the marketplace, you know. I think there's too many of them now. But we'll see over time what happens, you know, and I'm not saying that to you know, against my competitors or even anything that we've done, but, you know, everybody wanted a piece of the pie, you know. It's a must-have, you know. You know, we've cut deals or have relationships with Fox and CBS, you know, on a few of our Diginets. They saw the value, you know, and whatnot. There's other large station groups out there too that have brought some, you know, really strong Diginets to the table, you know. But then again, you know, only time will tell. But distribution is the key. If you don't have the cable or the satellite, you know, or even have the opportunity to go on the you know, streaming platforms, then it's going to be very difficult. Yep. Extremely difficult.
You got a number, Ellie?
I mean, I think Jeff's right in terms of the distribution aspect. The content is, you know, if you get the greatest content in the world, but you can't get your distribution out, then it's going to be tough. I think based on where things are going, there probably might be a correction. I'll go with 3.5. I'll take the over.
Over under.
Is that half one, our new paid programming network that we're launching here at the end of the month?
Exactly.
You create a good number, you got to have that happen there. Another interesting one, and Ellie, I'd like to get your perspective on this first, and I'm not sure what you guys are seeing out there with the fast channels, but is there a concern the popularity of fast channels and their ability to know who is watching what will result in more competition for the most watched programs, which could dilute programming available to Diginets?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that's always a concern in terms of, the increasing the viewership on a particular network. I think the ability, though, the more data that we have just makes everyone, smarter marketers, smarter advertisers, smarter agencies. So we're not afraid of, additional data out there. I think this is going to continue to help us optimize and maximize our clients' budgets when they spend it on linear or streaming, I should say. And obviously, every dollar that they give us, we want to spend as wisely as we can on their behalf to make sure that they're getting what they need out of it. So again, I think the more data, the better. We welcome it, and as long as the data is something that we can ingest and optimize and strategize on, we welcome it.
Jeff, your thoughts there? I mean, I think you've talked about this a little bit already, but maybe synthesize.
I mean, yes, content is king. But outside of a handful of agencies, no one's really buying program specific unless you offer some first run opportunities, which our networks have, and I believe a few others as well. But our clients target day parts, and I think that's where the majority of the data is today. We hear from all agencies that are looking at performance-based media on what day part's working more so than we hear about what show is working. Keep in mind they're buying volume, at a pretty efficient rate. So, you're going to end up with quite a bit of frequency in a day part on a weekly basis. So, I think that trend will continue for quite some time. There's just a lot of inventory out there. And then you look at the streaming platforms, in some cases, they don't even have any insertion, but there's very limited inventory in the streaming world and whatnot, and I don't know how long it'll take to find data for that or what systems they might be using or how they're going to compare it to linear. But, I think that's a question that needs to be presented to Nielsen and get their feedback.
One last one. I'm going to kind of tighten it up a little bit and ask you each from your perspective. Ellie, the perspective for you, obviously, what's the biggest challenge when you guys are looking at buying on Diginets? Jeff, what's your biggest challenge as sales leader on the Diginets side?
I think, don't get me wrong, no matter what you do, you're going to have challenges and hurdles, and we embrace them. But I think the understanding of the model, of Diginets, being that, you're available over the air, cable, satellite, that you really have an opportunity to have 100% penetration in the market, and people understanding that, we compete with cable networks, when we negotiate and things of that nature, and they know cable. But when you look at the Diginets, a lot of the buyers that we talk to who have, a cable background, they don't understand the true value of what they're getting, on a CPM and things of that nature. I think that's our biggest hurdle, being identified, what is our DNA? We're not ABC, CBS, or Fox. We're in a category of our own, and I think over time, as we mature, people will see, what our efficiencies are and what we bring to the table. But I think as a whole, for them to understand what a Diginet is, that terminology, the term. I think that's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, and I think from my side and my perspective, the biggest challenge is really, how far you can scale the Diginets. They're very successful, a lot of them for a lot of the clients, but obviously you really hit a cap on how much you can actually invest of your percentage of media dollars for your clients, and then also just having that conversation with the clients and educating them. Because when we go over the weekly results and talk to them on a regular basis, they see the strength that they're getting on those networks, and like, well, why can't we continue to spend more? And it's really just that education piece of, obviously you don't want to get to a point where you're capped and hitting at the point of diminishing returns. So I think it's the number one hurdle that we have to overcome on our end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great guys. as predicted prior to, we ran a little bit over, but great stuff from you. I think to Jeff's point, we can probably keep talking about this. I know I got more questions in my back pocket. We can probably keep talking about this for a while. So we appreciate you both joining us today. Really great to have you on board. Obviously, thank you both for being member companies of the PDMI, and always appreciate having you guys take part in everything we do, as well as our audience. Great audience today, very active. Thank you all for your questions. Thanks for listening in. We appreciate it. Your next scheduled opportunity to attend a live online Take 20 episode is next Wednesday, July 20th, as we take a look at the CBD marketplace. Please visit the pdmi.com/take-20 to register for the webinar and check out our upcoming schedule. Also, registration and hotel reservations are open for our next in-person event, PDMI West at Hard Rock Hotel San Diego on October 24th through 26th. John Yarrington would also tell me I was remiss if I didn't mention sponsorships are also available for PDMI West. Visit the pdmi.com/pdmi-west for more information and to book your badge today. Thanks again for checking out this episode of the PDMI's Take 20. Be well, take care. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.